slides. And it's really a great relief for me when I'm facilitating, have somebody else write for me, because nobody can read my writing even when I put it on the flip chart like that. But at this time, I'd like to call one of our more experienced facilitators to the lectern. She is Rita Hollada. She'll come up, also known as the Diva of Disaster on the net. Rita is going to talk to us today about CPIA 1. What we want to do here is give you an idea about the core program for CPIA. Come on up, Rita. Good. And I'm going to call on Rita to come back a little bit later, because I remember an incident, I mentioned her yesterday, that occurred when I was in one of her classes. And some of you folks that are not facilitators, and maybe some of you folks that are facilitators, you want to hear that story. Rita, my pleasure.
Well, good morning, everybody. And I probably should explain this Diva of Disaster thing. And I told Mike Grace at breakfast this morning, I thank you for this, Mike. When he was president of National PIA, many moons ago, it's been a long time, but early 90s, he appointed me to be the representative of PIA National in a committee called the Flood Insurance Producers National Committee, which is the producers' input to the people at FEMA and the NFIP. I still sit on that committee. I chaired it 3 times. I'm trying to get them to replace me. It's like, I'm getting too old. I want to retire someday. Find somebody new, and they won't let me go. And I thank Mike for that this morning. All the hours and years I have spent learning the ins and outs of the flood program are because of him.
You were the only good appointment I made.
Well, I thank you for that. When Kitty asked me, could you bring my little thingy up? When Kitty asked me to, or just said, put some ideas together, I really didn't know it was going to be specifically on part 1. So a couple of things I might have put on my slides I'm going to skip over at this point, because they aren't necessarily part 1. But there were a couple of points that I would like to make. If you can go ahead and flip to the next slide. And this is just a hodgepodge. 2 things I think we need to promote in the classes, and I don't like to be an official spokesman, recruiter for the AIM Society, but you get some great information from the AIM Society as you're a member, including the Agency Ideas newsletter. I always have one of those I carry with me and hang and hold up and say, this is a great spark that you keep getting coming to your office to say, these are some things you should try and you should do. And then, of course, every other week, I think it's on a Tuesday, Donna? Wednesday, somewhere in the middle of the week, doesn't hit you on Monday morning, you get the quick sales tips ideas, which again, it keeps the juices rolling. And I think when you're talking to producers and you're talking to people attending AIMS courses, that's important. You get stale. You stop doing things you did. And we say in CPIA 1 that education is learning something new, but training is remembering what you already know. And in most cases, people knew these things, and you just stopped doing them. And there's so many things. I was listening to Chester. Now, I have to tell you, I was Chester's mentor when he learned this program, and I'm sitting here listening to him today and saying, man, he's just gone leaps and bounds beyond, and I'm learning stuff from Chester to try and do. And that's what we all have to do as instructors, as facilitators, and as salespeople. And so I remind people that as you participate in the AIM Society, you get these fabulous resources, and we need to promote that in the classes and use some of the ideas that come out of those resources. They're great ideas for facilitators to work with in the presentation. So use the tools we've already got, the tools we're already being given. I think you got the message from Chester already. Get everybody involved from the very beginning of the day. They will sit there and want to be lectured to. They have come to other CE classes for years and years, and they've sat there in long rows, and they've been talked to for 8 hours, and they've phased out, phased in, and one of the consistent comments I get a lot of times is, wow, you kept me awake all day. And that's a compliment. But that's what they're used to when they come to a CE class. And that's what many of them think they're registering for. So the round tables, the different setup, all the toys and stuff that's sitting around on the table, the markers, the colored papers, the pads, and so forth. Let them know that they're somewhere different, and I tell them right in the beginning of day one, you're gonna be working. You're not gonna be listening to me. I don't have all the ideas, you have them, and we're gonna share them together. And I totally agree with Chester, get the people who came together split up. They're not gonna get any new ideas sitting there with the same people they work with every day. They've got to get split up and into different groups and interact with different groups of people. So separate the same people, the people who came together. You gotta know who your audience is, and that's the challenge of CPIA, it's especially the challenge of part one. Part one is all about prospecting. Now what's the use of standing there talking about joining industry groups and participating in professional associations if your audience is all personal lines? So you have to know who your audience is. From the very beginning, you've got to find out what their experience level is, what their specialties are. A recent challenge is we were doing an in-house CPIA 3-day program for a company. It was all captive agents of a single company. They had one market, one thing to sell, and they're all personal lines. Now you can't take the CPIA material and do a canned presentation. So it was like all day long, consistently, continuously adapting the marketing and the prospecting ideas to personal lines. And so instead of talking about an industry group, you're talking about a target population. You know, where are your targets retirees, are your targets young professionals? You constantly have to keep adapting the material. So for facilitators who have been there, done that, they know what I'm saying. For facilitators that are new, you'll find out when you finish a day of teaching CPIA, you are exhausted. Because it's been mentally exhausting. It's been a challenge every minute to keep adapting to your audience. But you gotta know who they are from the very beginning. The index cards work well that you mentioned, introducing one another at the table, just getting people to talk about who they are and what they know. And that's one of the things that I do early in part one. CPIA 1 talks about, one of the things that they talk about is knowing who you are, knowing your resources, and knowing your strengths, your weaknesses, and your opportunities and your threats. The SWOT analysis, it's the typical management thing we've learned forever. I, at the first break, hand out everybody a piece of paper from the chart, and put a blank piece of paper on the desk. And I have the table do a SWOT analysis right there after the first break, early in the first day, to discover at this table, because you're interacting with one another and you need to talk to one another, what is this table's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats? Now sometimes they're all personal lines people. So what's a weakness? They don't know anything about commercial lines. Do they need to? Yeah, we'll talk about that later. What are opportunities? What are some of the threats? But I get them started from the very beginning thinking about that, and then they can turn that back into my personal strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, my agencies, my company's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. But get them focused on something early, get them doing something early, get them participating early, because then you got them for all day. If you don't, they want to sit there like homeschool law to be lectured to. And this is not a lecture course, ever. I get them focused on something else early. Now, Sue, you've been in a class. Do you remember